Hey there guys, today we're going to be looking at what is probably the most extreme example of reverse Russian bias in the history of the game, where Russia got cucked out of a vehicle which they by all rights should have had, the ultimate fishbed variant, the MiG-21 Bison. And coincidentally, I know this video is going to be coming out shortly before the British get access to their own premium Hornet, so if you're wondering which of these two you should buy, here's the short answer. On paper, the Hornet is the quote-unquote better option due to getting more ordnance and having a better airframe at an only slightly higher BR, but the Bison, for reasons I'll get into shortly, is an excellent sort of brain-off premium which will get you 2 to 3 kill games over and over again with very minimal effort. And despite having a different name, just to be clear, this airframe is basically just the MiG-21 Bis. The weight is the same, the thrust is the same, and yes, it's still a flying air brake, but what makes it very different is the kit it gets access to. Instead of packing R-60s, R-13s, and if you're a little unhinged like myself, S-24 rockets for air-to-air engagements, this aircraft gets access to R-27s, though not R-27ERs, mind you, as well as R-73s. You also get access to a helmet-mounted display and a vastly improved radar. Given the R-73 is a thrust-vectoring IRCCM missile paired with an HMD, it tends to really be viewed as the main selling point of this aircraft, but in my opinion, people really underestimate those R-27s, and in fact, for me, they tend to be the primary killing instrument in most matches. This is because, unlike AIM-7Ms, Fs, and Ps, the R-27 is capable of pulling very hard right off the rails, and is nearly impossible to dodge at closer ranges. This pairs extremely well with the Bison's upgraded radar, which honestly feels like one of the better mid to high tier radars I've used. It seems very resistant to notching, and often holds lock just fine on enemies flying almost perfectly perpendicular to you, and even if someone does manage to notch you, because the R-27 gets data link and a huge 24 kilogram warhead, breaking lock is by no means a guarantee of survival. The only area where this aircraft really falls flat in terms of offensive armament is with its gun. Not only is it still running the same 23mm Gush as earlier MiG-21 variants, but the Bison only carries 200 rounds instead of the normal 250. I very frequently found myself running out of ammo, and the velocity on the 23mm is comparable to just opening up the canopy and trying to take a piss on nearby aircraft. Combined with the fact that at the time of this recording, cannon HE damage is still kind of bugged and not really working right, this means you really should not be expecting to get a whole lot of gun kills. The other big problem you're going to be running into is the fact that you'll very regularly get up-tiered to 12.7 and 13.0, and sorry to all the MiGers in the audience, and that's MiGers with an M, by the way, Mr. YouTube moderator bot, but 4th gens are going to absolutely crap all over this airframe in a dogfight unless the pilot really doesn't know what they're doing. So overall, I know things may not be sounding super positive so far, since you have an aircraft which is badly outranged in BVR, and which, despite having weapons optimized for close quarters, has an inferior airframe to most of its competition. The good news is, though, that with proper positioning, these shortcomings can be very easily overcome. For your opening move, gaining speed and altitude is your #1 priority. Being a MiG-21, the Bison will heavily bleed its speed basically any time it maneuvers, and doesn't accelerate particularly fast, so you'll want to start hoarding all the energy you can before the fighting starts. For that reason, I would advise climbing at 10 degrees off to the left on full afterburner until you get to just below contrail height, usually around 5,000 meters. From here, you want to just keep accelerating and picking up speed. You may get interrupted by enemy BVR launches, but if that happens, don't worry, just notch them and carry on. Once you reach about halfway up the map, usually best demarcated by the rows of AI ground targets, turn right back in towards the center of the map, towards the bulk of the enemy team as they've started engaging your teammates. I don't usually advise such an aggressive play, but with the Bison, this is going to be the best chance you get to get yourself some kills and affect the outcome of the match. The targets that are going to be most opportune for you at this stage are going to be the enemies coming down from high altitude to dive on your teammates. If possible, you want to engage these targets by surprise at very high speed, and blindside them with your R-27s at so close a range that dodging is simply impossible. Though they can theoretically hit from further away, I find the sweet spot for R-27 launches to be between 4 and 6 kilometers. Like I mentioned earlier, your R-27s will pull extremely hard even at low speeds, so a good launch from these distances is effectively a free kill. If you can use both of your R-27s to earn kills this way, then great, but if not, don't hesitate to use your R-27s against distracted enemies on the deck instead. Due to the size of its warhead, enemies flying close to the ground are much more likely to catch splash damage from it impacting than something like a Sparrow or an AMRAAM. If possible, when firing on low-flying enemies, try to ensure that the missile impacts at as steep an angle as possible to increase the chances of the enemy getting caught with a proximity fuse, even if the missile is tracking the ghost target that their radar reflection is casting onto the ground. Once your R-27s are expended, this is when things start to get a little bit sketchy. Now, R-73s are very capable missiles, but to use them most effectively, you'll want to launch them from as close a range as possible from rear aspect, which is honestly not always really possible. This is because the R-73 uses gate width IRCCM, which basically means the seeker shrinks down after locking onto a target so that it can't actually see the countermeasures an enemy drops. If you're too far away when you launch, the Seeker will still be able to see the flares, and if the Seeker doesn't have direct view of the enemy's engine exhaust, it's not going to track very well. This means that if you want to make efficient use out of your very limited missile loadout, you unfortunately can't always make full use out of the R-73's quite respectable range and insane thrust vectoring abilities, unless of course the enemy just isn't paying attention. I wish I had a more consistent set of parameters I could give you, but the truth is, you kinda just have to use your best judgment when using these things. If it looks like someone isn't paying attention, then sure, you can go ahead and take some pretty ambitious shots, but if it looks like they're a good distance away and pre-flaring though, maybe consider holding your fire. And then once you're out of missiles, you get to enjoy the unenviable position of dogfighting 4th gens in a MiG-21. How do you dogfight 4th gens in this thing? Well, not very well, although reversals are definitely possible. Premium noobs especially tend to not possess a very strong understanding of speed control, so if you cut your burner and then just pull as hard as you can, more inexperienced players are liable to just shoot right past you. Don't completely stall yourself out like this guy did though, because you may be shocked to hear that to make use of a reversal, you generally need to actually keep your nose up and have controllability over the aircraft. Revolutionary stuff, I know. When it comes to aiming your gun, if you're used to Western aircraft cannons, be aware that with the GSH you need to lead a lot more than you think you need to, and honestly, I'd recommend playing around a bit in test flight in order to get the hang of this thing. The radar lead indicator can help a bit, but it's a bit unreliable, so getting used to aiming yourself is always going to be the better option. Like you saw me do against that Hornet, I would also recommend going vertical after the merge, since your turn radius basically falling out of a stall will be much tighter than it will be if you're trying to rate fight on the deck. So this may give you just a slight opening to get a shot in, even against more maneuverable opponents. And if you still have an R-73 left over, this will put you in a great position to pull off a surprise off-bore sight shot. Speaking of which, if you do find yourself in a low-speed rate fight with someone, don't hesitate to use your takeoff flaps. These will help generate a lot more lift and let you kind of float in the air, potentially giving you yet another opportunity to force an overshoot. Just one last thing to keep in mind, the Bison does not have a lot of countermeasures, so be disciplined with how you use them. I have actually run out of them on several occasions, and if you're someone who doesn't mind fiddling with the extra keybinds, you may want to consider manually splitting flare and chaff use. I don't do it personally because I have bad short-term memory and often forget to change it back. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap it up for this one. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Check out my merch store if you want to support the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one.